Live from New Delhi, you're watching special broadcast on DD Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Russia visit to participate at the BRICS summit in Kazan. Well, this is a special broadcast for the next 1 hour. We'll get you all the updates from Kazan, and also in a short while from now, Prime Minister Modi will be arriving at the summit venue in Kazan. We will be joined by experts to talk about the overarching agenda of the BRICS summit under the chairmanship of Russia in general, and particularly India's role in the BRICS summit, and much more, with the guests joining us in the studio and Jessica Taneja, our correspondent, joining us live from Kazan as well. So coming up next in our, we have more action lined up for you. Stay with us. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be attending the 16th BRICS summit in Russia's Kazan in a short while from now. The summit is themed as strengthening multilateralism for just global development and security. In fact, the BRICS leaders will be exchanging views on pressing issues on the global and regional agenda. They will be discussing three main pillars of cooperation identified by the Russian chairmanship: politics and security, the economy and finance, and cultural and humanitarian ties. Particular attention will be given to the potential expansion of BRICS through the proposed establishment of a new category of partner nations, quote unquote. The outcome of these discussions will be summarized in the Kazan Summit Declaration. A BRICS plus outreach format meeting will also be convened today, with the representatives from nearly 40 countries in attendance. Well, now let's take a quick look at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's itinerary for day 2 of the Russia visit to attend the Kazan summit. As I just mentioned, in a while from now, at around 12:30 IST, Prime Minister Modi will be arriving at the BRICS summit venue, and there's going to be a family photo or a photo op. Then between 12:45 to 1415 hours, Prime Minister Modi will also attend the plenary session. That's the itinerary right on your screen. Post the plenary session, which is scheduled for the afternoon, Prime Minister will be attending the second session, scheduled between 14:30 to 16:30 hours. Thereafter, on the sidelines of the summit, which is around in the evening at around 16:40 hours, Prime Minister Modi is also expected to hold a very important bilateral meeting with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Prime Minister will then hold a bilateral meeting with the President of Uzbekistan, Shavkat Mirziyoyev, and post this bilateral meet, there's going to be a press briefing which is scheduled at around 5:15 India time in the evening, 5:15 p.m. At around 1800 hours today, Prime Minister Modi will be departing from Kazan in Russia. After concluding his 2-day Russia visit, Prime Minister Modi is expected to arrive in India late in the evening at around 23:30 hours. Let's quickly go live across to Kazan, from where DD India's Jessica Taneja continues to report live. Jessica, now over to you. The day is here, and the summit and the summitry is going to take the center stage. We're expecting Prime Minister Modi to arrive in a while. Just give us an overview, the overarching agenda under the chairmanship of Russia, the areas that have been identified with a specific focus on the expansion of the BRICS rubric.
Well, good morning to you as well, Sakal. Coming to you from Kazan this morning, an action-packed day here. In fact, entire media is gathered here from all the BRICS nations, including the countries who've been invited as well. We're expecting the Turkish counterpart also to be here, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, in a short while from now. And of course, our Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, would also be here in about half an hour. Where the session begins. As you pointed out, there will be a photo op session, and later on the plenary session, and the most anticipated event of the evening, of the day, pardon me, would be his bilateral meeting with his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping, and that perhaps would give out much of the agenda of what is observed at the BRICS summit today. But talking about other sessions as well, And the focus of the BRICS summit and the agenda at this time around in Kazan, of course, is about economic integration, looking at enhancing trade of local currency. Now, there were talks about a BRICS payment system, but we heard from the Foreign Secretary yesterday who had dismissed those reports and said, we're not looking for an alternative to SWIFT. If there is one, they're not aware of it, and there are no discussions on that happening, at least for now. But talk about other countries and a potential expansion. Now, this is the first BRICS summit where 4 new members have been added: Iran, Ethiopia, United Arab Emirates, and Egypt. And that will be certainly interesting to see on how that plays out and the leaders finally meet. Talking about including potential partner countries for dialogue. Now, that is something that the leaders will mull over today. And also talk about a different kind of economic cooperations and integration. Now, remember, this grouping doesn't have a particularly underlying agenda of countering the West, but at least developing an alternative to the Western architecture and work towards that agenda in a sense where they could come together without the interference or weaponization of the existing financial orders, and they could, of course, mutually trade with each other, enhance that trade. So that would be something that one could see focus on.
And having said that, what all India brings to the table, not only in terms of expansion of the BRICS grouping, the partner nation, establishment of new category, but overall, because the timings of it makes this, summit under the chairmanship of Russia itself very interesting. In the context of, Jessica, the statements that we have heard from both leaders yesterday.
That's correct. The timing, of course, is everything when you talk about the BRICS summit that is taking place. There are conflicts taking place both in West Asia and Eurasia here, with Russia-Ukraine conflict continuing. You heard from the leaders yesterday. Prime Minister Modi stressed on diplomacy and dialogue. And even in the past, India has remained consistent in advocating for diplomacy, as well as making sure that the message reaches out, which is that this is not the era of war, and perhaps no solutions are found on battlefields. But the relationship between India and Russia continues to grow with various other sectors of cooperation beyond energy, beyond defense, looking at other aspects of economic integration. Also expect something on the lines of India-Russia collaboration on the Northern Sea route and the resource-rich Arctic region. Now, that is something the two sides are exploring. But yesterday, during
Jessica,
the press briefing, the Foreign Secretary also pointed out the measures that they have undertaken, in fact, our bilateral ties when it comes to defense have enhanced, and the momentum continues. But for the moment, India's interaction with other leaders, as you also pointed out, Prime Minister will be meeting with his Uzbekistan counterpart as well. And that will be something interesting to point out as to what areas of cooperation would be found with Uzbekistan in that particular aspect. Now, Sakal, it's important to point out, the countries being represented here, of course, also reflect on India's outreach to various other nations, especially the Eurasian region. And India does want to sort of make sure that there is more cooperation and enhancement of bilateral ties when it comes to Eurasia. And that was visible during India's participation at the SCO earlier as well. And you'd remember, Foreign Secretary had gone to Kazakhstan when the SCO summit was held. So, of course, that outreach also remains to be seen.
Okay, Jessica, also, what for India also takes center stage today is the meeting between, you're smiling out there, President Xi Jinping and our Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Again, in the context of the statements that came from MEA yesterday, in the backdrop of LAC engagement or arrangement, not really speculating or preempting the outcome. What's the buzz there?
Well, Sakal, it seemed like a step in the right direction, if you ask us journalists who were at the briefing yesterday. We were anticipating that there would be a bilateral, of course, with the Chinese Premier Xi Jinping, but of course, we'd have to wait for the official confirmation, and now that is going to take place in the afternoon. All eyes will be on the outcomes. Now, if you go and read through what has been put out in terms of the disengagement or the agreement on the patrolling points or the grazing areas, which will now be reversed to 2020, is certainly a step in the right direction. Of course, it looks at the relationship between India and China that had soured since 2020. Indian Prime Minister and Chinese President Xi Jinping have only met on the sidelines of BRICS summit last year and many other summits before 2020 and even after 2020, but no bilateral one-on-one meeting since 2020 when that standoff took place at the Galwan Valley. So, of course, this is important as now both the countries have agreed and also look at how much work went into coming to this truce of sorts, because there have been there have been many rounds of military talks to come to this conclusion, a result of fruitful diplomacy, one could say. But in the future, we'll have to see as to how the Chinese side continues to, agree on the engagement or stick to the agreement, especially when it comes to the patrolling points, because it's been a point of friction not just once but even in 2017. Then in
because of our past experiences,
so that friction continues. Yes, so of course cautious there, but one will hope that normal trade ties do resume after this. We've stopped direct commercial flights to China, so there's anticipation within the business community as well. Whether this would then translate or move forward into normalizing trade ties and investment from China, because the resilience of supply chains, and of course China being an important global partner and an industrial base, a huge industrial base in the world, it'll be important to have. It's important to have normalized trade relationships.
Jessica.
And we're given to understand that there was a lot that went into normalizing the ties, but we hope for the outcomes of that bilateral meeting.
Yes. Jessica, I would request you to stay with us since we are talking about Foreign Secretary's brief on, India-China bilateral today. Just stay with us. Let's quickly revisit that portion. In fact, viewers, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as Jessica also talked about, will be holding bilateral talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping on the margins of the BRICS summit in Russia's Kazan on Wednesday. And this meeting comes close on the heels of New Delhi and Beijing reaching an agreement on patrolling arrangements in areas along the line of actual controls, as per the situation reached in the year 2020, that may lead to disengagement and resolution of other issues in future. Let's listen.
Confirm that there will be a bilateral meeting held between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping tomorrow, 23rd of October, on the sidelines of the BRICS summit.
Well, remember, BRICS was BRIC in the beginning, is one of the most important intergovernmental organizations which centers around the notions of multipolarity and also demands for decentralization of multilateral organizations and mutual cooperation. This was envisaged way back in 2001 by Goldman Sachs banker as a possible group of fast-growing developing countries. It now also boasts to raise the voice of the global South. As many new members have joined in and more are keen to join the grouping, let's take a brief look at this report which talks about the journey of BRIC to BRICS so far.
The leaders of BRIC countries met for the first time in St. Petersburg in Russia on the margins of G8 Outreach Summit in July 2006. After a series of high-level meetings, the first BRIC summit was held in Ekaterinburg, Russia on 16th June 2009. In September 2010, BRIC Group was renamed as BRICS after South Africa was accepted as a full member at the BRIC Foreign Ministers' meeting in New York. Accordingly, South Africa attended the third BRIC summit in Sanya City in China on 14th April 2011. A further expansion of BRICS took place in 2024 with 5 new members, which includes Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. However, Saudi Arabia is yet to fully participate in the group's deliberations. India took over the BRICS chairmanship from Russia and held it until 31st December 2021. This was the 13th BRICS summit. The theme and approach of India's BRICS chairmanship was BRICS at 15, intra-BRICS cooperation for community, consolidation and consensus. Many firsts were achieved during India's BRICS chairship, which included BRICS Digital Health Summit, first BRICS Water Ministers meeting, adoption of BRICS Counter-Terrorism Action Plan, launch of BRICS Alliance for Green Tourism, operationalization of BRICS Agricultural Research Platform, and signing of agreement on BRICS Remote Sensing Satellite Constellation. On January 1st, 2024, Russia has taken over as the BRICS chair. The 16th BRICS summit under Russia's chairship will be held from 22nd to 24th October in Kazan in Russia. The theme of the summit is strengthening multilateralism for just global development and security. More than 250 BRICS meetings and other events have been proposed by Russia. The major activities for 2024 include integration of invited countries as full members of BRICS, further development of BRICS partner country model, and list of prospective partner countries and report by the next summit. Kazan BRICS Summit will provide an opportunity to member leaders to further strengthen the cooperation at a time when the world is facing two conflicts between Russia and Ukraine, as well as between Israel and Hamas. Bureau Report, DD India.
Let me quickly go across to our power-packed panel. Ambassador Amrit Lagoon, former senior diplomat, joining us online from New Delhi. I also welcome Professor Sanjay Bhardwaj from School of International Studies in our Delhi studio. And Jessica Taneja of DD India continues to be with us live from Kazan in Russia. Ambassador Lagoon, I would like to start with you, sir. Your views on the overall agenda of this edition of BRICS Summit under the chairmanship of Russia, and the fact that it really matters to put in where we are looking at leaders from more than 24 nations converging in Kazan. And if I'm not mistaken, this could be one of the largest events that Russia has hosted in a while, since there has been this whole Russia-Ukraine onslaught grabbing international headlines the last 2-3 years. Ambassador Lagoon.
Thank you. Yeah, so Russia, as you rightly pointed out, had hosted the first summit of BRICS, or BRIC was at that time. And now it is hosting in a place of which we call Kazan, which is the Russian province of Turkestan, which is basically very close to Central Asia. It's not the you can say the real European heart of Russia. So it is like giving a signal that this summit can be like a bridge between the East and West, and not necessarily an antagonistic stand against the West. And for the agenda for world security and also the financial architecture are very, very important, especially from the Russian point of view, because Russia itself is involved in one of those major conflicts right now going on. It is, they had expected that it would be over very quickly when they started in 2022, February. So it has been over 2.5 years now, and there is still no end to the conflict in Ukraine, which is it is involved in Ukraine. And in fact, it is getting to some extent from bad to worse.
Okay.
And and also it has added fuel to the fire, the conflict going on in the Middle East.
But in the light of Honorable Prime Minister's opening remarks yesterday, as far as Russia-Ukraine conflict is concerned, and Ambassador Lagoon, India's role in that, that India is ready to offer and assist, quote unquote. Well, do you think there are going to be some conversations in the summitry revolving around that?
Yeah, at least definitely at the bilateral level, it is likely to happen, because India and Russia have a strategic partnership and high-level dialogue which takes place every year. And incidentally, Prime Minister Modi had visited Russia before recently, and he held a meeting with Mr. Putin, and then he followed it up with a visit to Eastern Europe, Poland, and Ukraine itself, where he met Mr. Zelensky. So our Prime Minister Modi is in a very enviable position in the sense
Okay.
that he has read both leaders' mind in the ongoing conflict, and India, of course, would desire that this conflict comes to an end as soon as possible. And in the light of the new architecture in the world, which has developed after Second World War, under the aegis of UN, it is being threatened by these conflicts where the territorial integrity of countries are being threatened, whatever it is. So the Prime Minister is likely to reiterate its position, and similarly also in the region of Israel or Middle East and Palestine, a similar war is going on, and again, the territorial boundaries which were there under the aegis of UN, those are being threatened.
Okay.
So India has a very enviable position, and
Right,
it is
sir.
Yeah.
So stay with us. Let me take this to Jessica, because she's where the action is in Kazan. And Jessica, the largest gathering of world leaders amidst war for Putin. And there's also this, thought that this is some sort of a signal to the West. But this summit means a lot to Vladimir Putin.
Indeed, it does. And it is his moment to say that he's not as isolated as the West may think. Because the countries that are being represented at BRICS, of course, represent a significant contribution to the global GDP, approximately 36.5%. Compare that to G7, which is about 30%. So, of course, he has a lot to say when it comes to these countries' participation. And the new members joining it only shows how countries are interested in BRICS, not because it's a grouping that offers an extensive economic, very extensive and sustained economic cooperation from the very start, but also the fact that there has to be an alternative when the Western architecture doesn't really include countries of the global South. So Russian President Vladimir Putin would want to take this opportunity to say that there is an alternate structure that exists, and perhaps Iran and Russia are two countries which have suffered the most when it comes to Western sanctions. So more economic integration, of course, means that this is the forum where, or this is a multilateral.
As we fix Jessica's line there, Professor Bharadwaj, would you like to come in here? So can BRICS really offer a counterbalance to the existing world order? She spoke about the Iran factor and the Russia factor, and interestingly, we've had meetings with both yesterday, and today we're looking at China. But just an overview of the timings of it and the significance of it for the chair. First.
Let me take in that way. There are of course, there is a common agenda of the BRICS countries that they are looking forward to have more economic integrations. They are looking de-dollarization of the economy, and they are preferring to have transactions in their own currency. Like the Chinese, they always advanced, and during when there were sanctions on Russia, the Chinese, they talk. They have exchanged in their own currency. So this is one aspect, that the common agendas of economic and sustainable economic growth and integrations and resource sharing and all that. But I would also say that the country, they have also very specific their own agendas, and there it comes while you talk about Putin and Russia. They are looking forward to build an anti-American bloc, or where this has been joined by the Chinese and the Iran, I would say. But India, I'm not sure India is not joining any bloc or joining against any bloc. So India is not supporting this idea of anti-American and anti-West bloc could become BRICS, because India is believing moreover in the multi-aligned foreign policy, where we are part of the BRICS, we are part of the SCO, we are part of the Quad.
And so we're also seen as a bridge between the North and the South.
Of course.
And the South and the West.
Yes, that is also a very important point you have raised, that in fact India is a bridge between the different groups and different institutions in the world, and where India had been can become and can talk about the concerns of the global south, what the global south, and this has been started while India was hosting G20 summit, and India has become the voice of the global south, and there we talk about global commons as well as global goods. And in the global commons, where the Chinese and the Indians, they have a common agenda of the climate change and all that, but the global goods, what it is impacting, I think it is impacting by the two wars happening between Russia and Ukraine, where the food prices gone very high, fuel prices had gone very high, and the tourism business and all that impacting on the global south. So I think BRICS can address these issues. But I will also take one more point here, very interesting point, that where the countries, like we have seen the 15th BRICS summit in South Africa, and that was not very conducive environment while Xi Jinping did not join the dinner, the business dinner hosted by then. And the second very important, that Putin did not participate in because of the ICC's issues, that and the third, that the way they were hosting, the South Africans hosting, I think the number of the countries including India were not happy the way they are inviting. So, and nothing had happened except the few countries they have designated that they will become the member of BRICS. And in that very interesting point where Saudi Arabia and UAE was also offered, and Argentina was one among them, including Iran and all that. But interestingly, Argentina has declined to become the member of the BRICS, but and Saudi Arabia did not answer yet. UAE has become the member.
Yes.
But interesting point is, while Iran and UAE join from the Gulf countries, would definitely strengthen the voice and views of the BRICS countries, and that could balance somehow what it has been constructed by the West, or by the dollar, or by the Americans. So I think the interest of these countries who are part of that, because India wants to have good relations with Iran, because we are having very good relations because of the business and trade and investment.
So the larger question here is, so can BRICS really shift or BRICS plus really shift the world order? I want to take this to Ambassador Lagoon. So are these countries already challenging? Is this template there already existing, the narrative that these Ambassador Lagoon, the BRICS and BRICS plus nations have it in them in terms of challenging the US-led world order? Because we're looking at BRICS plus, that is something which brings together some of the world's largest energy producers and buyers together.
Yeah, I would say from India's point of view, rather than challenging, it is better to use the word to bring the two worlds together and more cooperative world. Like we have this a concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So India has this chance of living up to it in that sense. And as Professor said, that India is unlike some of the powerful countries of BRICS, who want to take a very strong anti-West stance. India has been taking a more balanced stance.
Neutral, yes.
And, neutral
nuanced position.
And this is a more or less a sort of reflection of the India's stand, which flowed from its role during the non-aligned movement. When the Cold War period was there. So that way, and non-aligned played a very useful role during that time. So there is no doubt to, or there is no any reason to not to expect India to play a similar role. Especially India is one of the biggest countries. If you say Russia and China, others are all relatively much smaller, both in terms of economy and population and the global weight. Now, India's weight, of course, has increased considerably in the last 10, 15 years.
And that is something, Ambassador, which Russia has acknowledged and spoken about it in so many ways. I mean, if you look at the visuals of President Putin, if we can just play those visuals, yesterday they met twice. In fact, there was a first formal meeting of the day, and then later in the evening, the way President Putin, there is this personal touch that you see in the body language.
And President Putin, especially personally himself, is very much looks towards India, and even when India has deepened its ties with West, especially USA, its relationship with Russia has not diminished or has not been affected as speculated, and it is hats off largely to President Putin, who understands the importance of India both in context of global world. And they know that Russia has never acted historically any time against India. And India keeps this in mind, which was also stated by our foreign minister. So Russia has always stood by India in any test of time, whereas other countries, it has been more an up and down relationship with the West. So we want to maintain that, we want to signal that. And that is why Russia very much feels comfortable. And also, in its growing relationship with China, especially in the economic side and security side. Russia knows that, they should not put all eggs in one basket, because again, historically with China, Russia shares a very big border, especially in the south, during that river. And historically that has always been not very conducive relationship between the two, especially in the Siberian side. So there is always a fear of Chinese in Russians' mind, Chinese territorial expansion that side. It may not be obvious now, but there is a lurking doubt. And they know that to balance that, India, with whom they have a time-tested relationship in all areas and never has been inimical at any time, especially in the recent past. So for President Putin, India holds a very important friendship and significance. And that is likely to play out in this summit, especially between India and Russia.
Yes.
And India's moderating role is likely to be very
that
much.
point on India's role as a moderator, Professor Bharadwaj, yesterday in Honorable Prime Minister's opening remarks, there's this, and in fact, this was elaborated in the press briefing also yesterday by the MEA, that, the fact that the both leaders are meeting twice in 3 months, and in a decade, this is, I think, the 7th meeting, and Prime Minister briefed him about his interactions with other regional players, plus his, Kiev visit, and India is willing to assist and offer any help if need be. There are murmurings, there are going to be some sort of conversations revolving around it. Are we looking at a stage where India's role, perhaps as an interlocutor or a mediator, is going to get a little more crystallized here?
Yeah, a very important point, 2, 3 important. One is, of course, that what is India's track record. India had been a supporter of the peace and stability all over the world, and being a largest functional democracy, that India can play a very constructive role through dialogues, debates, discussions and negotiations on all the conflicting issues, including Russia and Ukraine, because India has been a law-abiding country. India is believing in the UN Charter that sovereignty and territorial integrity with every country should respect. So this is one aspect, but very important point what Ambassador has raised, that there is uncertainty in the behavior of the Chinese and Americans on number of the global and regional issues, that they what interest they will prioritize, either economic interest or security interest, that you do not know. And he has given very clear example of 1970s, 1969, when there were Sino-Soviet conflicts on the border. So here you can see that who are the trusted friend. The trusted friend is the Russia and India. They have trade, investment and economic relations. We have very strong defense and strategic partnership with Russia, and that has been a time tested. Whenever India required the Russians, they had been always with us, and India, whenever the Russians they required, India had been. And you can see when there were crises, there were sanctions on Russia in this Ukraine crisis, India had been doing the business with the Russians. So we are having that commonality of the interest that is bringing together. But very interesting point what the Putin is doing right now, that if the BRICS, beyond the BRICS summit or along the BRICS summit, if they can bring the thaw between India and China, that we are not progressing at all from last 5 years. And the way they are negotiating and talking about the patrolling issues and about the peace and stability in the on the border issues, I think that could happen, would be a booster for the growth of economic growth of India, because the Chinese, they are in crisis, economic crisis right now. There are high housing issues and there are a number of issues. So the Chinese, they are also looking that to have access to India's emerging middle class market. So there are interests that the Chinese, they are looking to have a thaw with India because of the economic interest, because of the increasing Chinese presence in this region, that also concerns to the Chinese as well as the Russians.
Professor Bhardwaj, let's also take a moment and play out this report for our viewers, for those who have just tuned in, and I'm requesting Ambassador Lagun to also stay with us because this is important, what happened yesterday on day one of the engagements as far as Prime Minister Modi is concerned. Remember, he met Russian President Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Kazan. That's what we are discussing, the outcome of that meeting. The meeting was pretty much an indicative of the close relationship, the bonhomie between the two nations and the two leaders. The bond between the two leaders is so special that the meeting witnessed a light moment when the Russian President Vladimir Putin said he thought Prime Minister Modi would understand his remarks without translation, as both nations shared a tight relationship. Listen in.
Ties between India and Russia remain as strong as ever. This was clear during India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of the 16th BRICS summit in Kazan. Prime Minister Modi lauded Russia's leadership in BRICS, noting the group's increasing global influence, with several nations eager to join.
मेरे लिए खुशी की बात है कि ब्रिक्स समिट के लिए कजान जैसे खूबसूरत शहर में आने का अवसर मिला है। इस शहर के साथ भारत के गहरे और ऐतिहासिक संबंध रहे हैं। कजान में भारत के नए कॉन्सुलेट के खुलने से ये संबंध और मजबूत होंगे।
The two leaders reviewed the full spectrum of India-Russia relations, focusing on progress made since the last meeting in Moscow. Discussions centered on enhancing cooperation across key sectors and sharing views on critical global issues, including the ongoing conflict in Ukraine.
एक्सेलेंसी, रूस और यूक्रेन के बीच चल रहे संघर्ष के विषय पर हम लगातार संपर्क में रहे हैं। जैसा मैंने पहले भी कहा है, हमारा मानना है कि समस्याओं का समाधान शांतिपूर्ण तरीके से ही होना चाहिए। शांति और स्थिरता की जल्द से जल्द बहाली का हम पूरी तरह समर्थन करते हैं। हमारे सभी प्रयास मानवता को प्रमुखता देते हैं। आने वाले समय में भी भारत हर संभव सहयोग देने के लिए तैयार है। एक्सेलेंसी, आज इन सभी विषयों पर विचार साझा करने का एक और महत्वपूर्ण अवसर है।
President Putin reiterated the strategic nature of the India-Russia partnership, emphasizing the importance of cooperation that will need to make important decisions that would strengthen BRICS' functioning and its global role.
We appreciate the ongoing Indo-Russian cooperation as important. Russia and India have a special privileged partnership which keeps growing. We welcome your decision to open Council General in Kazan. The relations between the two nations will improve under your leadership.
Earlier, Prime Minister Modi received a warm welcome from the Indian community in Kazan. The Indian diaspora in Kazan continues to make its mark globally, promoting Indian culture and contributing to various sectors with pride. With inputs from Jessica Taneja, Bureau Report, DD India.
Also staying with the engagements of day one, Prime Minister also held bilateral talks with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. Discussions focused on India-Iran bilateral relations, including on the importance of INSTC and Chabahar port for regional connectivity. India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri said that Prime Minister Modi raised concerns about the situation in West Asia, stressed upon protection of civilians and the role of diplomacy in de-escalation of the situation.
President Pezeshkian had a fruitful discussion. This was their first meeting since President Pezeshkian's election as the 9th president of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Prime Minister congratulated him on his recent victory and reaffirmed India's commitment to deepening the age-old bilateral ties with Iran. The discussion focused on key areas of cooperation, particularly the Chabahar port and the international north-south transport corridor, which are crucial for enhancing regional connectivity and economic partnerships. In fact, seamless connectivity in the region was a theme of this meeting.
Let's go once again live over to Kazan from where DD India's Arun Sharma and Jessica Taneja continues to stay with us live. They're there. Arun, coming to you first. Now, the overarching agenda of the summit under the chairmanship of Russia, given the timings of it, it's very, very important. It matters a great deal to President Putin. In general, a broader view, and in particular, expectations, what all India brings to the table. Everyone seems to be looking up to India, the global north, the global south, as well as Russia.
Absolutely. And you can, conclude this from the remarks of the Russian president yesterday when he said that we don't need translation, while interacting with each other, and the kind of chemistry that both the leaders were sharing with each other. So this shows a message that how bonded India and Russia are together, when it comes, to the bilateral relationship. Second important part, what India brings to the table. Well, India brings a lot of things to the table. First of all, India leads by example, and and India showcases it to the world. If you recall it, Sakal, that during the G20 summit when the Russia-Ukraine crisis broke out, even at that point in time, nobody was talking about the fertilizer subsidy. Nobody was talking about farmers who were directly impacted by high fertilizers, because of the Ukraine conflict. But it was Prime Minister Narendra Modi who highlighted this during his intervention in the G20 summit. That that fertilizer prices are rising, and we need to ensure that the supply chains do not get disrupted. So Prime Minister Modi has become, or he's ensured that how India can become the voice of global South, and this is the way how India is becoming the voice of global South, and that is the reason why more than 24 of countries, they want to become the part of BRICS grouping, because they think that their voices can be heard on the multilateral platform. Well, Jessica, would you like to add more on this aspect as well?
It's correct. BRICS offers a platform, a multilateral platform where you've seen in the recent past as well, countries have got together. And as you were pointing out, more than 24 countries have expressed interest. Of course, looking at an alternative, as I pointed out earlier, to the existing Western architecture, not necessarily for India, it's not necessarily being anti-Western, but non-Western, yes, and being part of various other multilateral groupings where it can pursue its own strategic interests, as is the policy of India, which is strategic autonomy. So going with that ahead, talking about economic integration and payment gateways, particularly when there were questions on the BRICS payment system. You heard from the Foreign Secretary yesterday who said that this is an erroneous, this is an erroneous idea of continuing to go with that payment system. There is no alternative to the SWIFT that the BRICS is coming up with. But yes, in the future, there could be trading in local currencies. That is a certainty, and that most of the nations do. And India's export, which has been to the global South, and integrating those countries into a framework of financial structure, which could, of course, allow them to have their own engagements, particularly with countries which are, no more developing, but countries like India, which are middle powers, and perhaps showcase the kind of heft on global stage. Look at India's payment gateway. So looking at India's payment gateway, the UPI, by now, Sakal, It is operational in more than 2,000 countries, and the RuPay card. Expect that to expand as well. Apart from the partner countries who will be joining in, certainly BRICS as a forum provides India that momentum to move forward with its own economic agenda and more economic cooperation, even with the Eurasian countries. Now, this is particularly important. While the focus would be on the India-China bilateral relation, one should also look at how India takes its relationship forward with the Eurasian countries, especially given the recent engagements in the past.
Having said that, Jessica, can BRICS offer a counterbalance as far as the existing world order is concerned? And having said so, India is going to play a pivotal role, like for both of you. What are you picking up there?
So, see, Sakal, I mean, more than the journalists from the BRICS countries, the journalists from the Western countries are more in number as far as this BRICS summit is concerned.
Okay,
so,
that's interesting trivia. Yes.
So yeah, so they're closely monitoring this entire situation because of the fact that the way the BRICS is gaining its momentum, and of course for the fact, Sakal, that as Prime Minister Narendra Modi says that we don't believe in countering any grouping. We don't believe in countering any kind of grouping on the multilateral platform. Our idea is our own interest. And how can we become the voice of Global South? How can we become? Now, it is because of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Sakal. You would remember that post-COVID, when India was hosting the G20 summit, before that, Prime Minister Modi did a Voice of Global South, whereby, he interacted with more than 100 countries, the Global South, and tried to take their inputs as to what can be, taken forward and how can their views be taken forward and can be kept on the multilateral platforms like G20. So after this, these countries of the Global South have started to believe that our voices can also be heard. And therefore, there's an aspiration globally that, yes, we can also become part of some grouping whereby our interests, our concerns can be heard and that can be kept. And India is a prominent member as far as BRICS grouping is concerned. And that is the reason these countries are more than interested in joining a grouping called BRICS, whereby India is an important and integral part of it. As Prime Minister Modi back home in India says that Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, that means taking together a development for all. So, Prime Minister is also, reciprocating this on an international platform and globally, that how can we take the underdeveloped countries, the emerging economies together and can take forward.
Arun, the inclusion of, that reminds me, that point, both of you, the inclusion of African Union under the India's G20 presidency. In line with that, the other aspiring nations, there are 40 of them at least, who want to be part of the grouping. Just to put this in perspective, both of you, a considerable amount of focus in this summit is going to be the broader contours of what defines who is in and who is not. The expansion of the BRICS grouping or BRICS in a new category of the partner nations. What exactly are you guys picking up on that?
When it comes to the expansion of expansion of BRICS and adding new countries to the fold, you could look at the partner countries that would join in, the dialogue partners, because there are certain set criteria when it comes to joining BRICS, especially when it comes to economic status. Now, there have been various countries who've shown interest. You talk about Thailand, Vietnam. They have also expressed interest to join BRICS, given the kind of economic integration that is visible now. Look at the new development bank that was established, just about a few years ago. It has a contingency reserve arrangement of about $100 billion, out of which, apart from that, the BRICS Bank has also disbursed $30 billion of funds towards various development projects across the Global South. So, of course, the momentum is picking up. And when you talk about comparing that to existing world order or the World Bank or the IMF that also gives out loans, of course, it is significantly low. But look at the inception. It's just fairly new. You talk about European Union when it adopted a common currency, which is the euro. It took them 4 decades to adopt that currency. So, at BRICS Summit this time, we're not talking about adopting a new BRICS currency, but certainly looking at ways where local currencies can trade. And that is already happening with many countries, especially India and Russia. The entire oil trade is in rupee ruble. So expect that to move forward. But apart from that, it is again not a challenge to the Western architecture, but definitely offers an alternative to allow inclusion of countries that have been left out, especially the developing nations, who've reeled under the pandemic, who faced challenges because of the conflict in West Asia and also the conflict here in Eurasia.
Yeah.
So,
Arun?
Jessica, just one more point to add here, Sakal, very quickly, because we're talking about common currency. The very basis of the common currency is trust. So, until and unless there is no trust, we can't trade in common currency. So, it is very important for a grouping to have all the members, the like-minded democracies and like-minded countries, to have trust amongst each other. And that is what this grouping is focusing about before having a common currency. Because, it looks very fancy that we'll be having common currency, but this cannot be achieved in 1 day or 2 days.
Right.
It takes time, but before achieving this common currency, there's a need to develop to have a trust. And that is what India is highlighting here, that yes, let's have trust. And India is showing it by example that the way we have done or democratized UPI, the way we have democratized technology to other countries, in a similar fashion, we can have trust. Because, if in the case somebody is buying something from another person cross-border, so if in case there is no trust, what is the surety of having or getting back the payment? And that is the reason you have to have a trust as a basis before having a common currency. And that is what India would be highlighting here, leading by example, showcasing it on the multilateral or this international platform.
Okay. Before I leave you both, a quick shift of focus on that important event of the day, Arun and Jessica, the bilateral between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Jessica.
That's correct. That will be an important event to watch out for. Expect that to happen during the afternoon, right, Arun? And, you've seen the build-up to that, Sakal. If you recall Foreign Secretary's briefing right before Prime Minister's visit to Russia, there was an announcement that patrolling points have been agreed will be reversed to what it was in 2020. There has been a disengagement. Earlier, it was said that 75% was done, and the rest, of course, yesterday was made clear that the agreement has been reached, and this is an important and a very significant development because this could potentially pave way for normalizing at least trade ties between India and China. You talk about the business community that has been affected the most with this diplomatic standoff, so to say, but it took a lot of effort by the Indian side, to make sure to arrive at this point. There have been as many as approximately 13 to 20, military level talks that have borne fruit now. So given the kind of effort that has gone into normalizing ties, but of course one has to tread with caution when it comes to China. We've seen in the recent past, in 2017 and then 2020, and also briefly in 2022, skirmishes have happened. So treading with caution and the contentious issue of patrolling still remains to be seen. But for the moment, we're given to understand that a consensus has been reached, an agreement has been reached, and let's wait for that potential outcome later in the evening with, of course, more information added.
Absolutely. So let me add one point, Jessica, here.
Sure.
So why China and India now coming together very shortly over here? Now, the way India's stature is rising on international platforms, specifically after the G20 summit, the world is, noting the efforts that India is taking. That's number one. Number two, China recently China has pumped in massive stimulus because we know this fact that Chinese economy is going through a rough patch. An entire world is going through a rough patch because of a post-COVID pandemic and of course, post this conflict that is happening. So now the focus is that no major economy can have that capacity.
Okay, I think Arun and Jessica, thank you very much if you could hear us for that fantastic live update from Kazan. We will try and reconnect with them in a bit. But before I turn to my guests, because we got those some live breaking inputs from Kazan, before that, let's also revisit some of the important moments of the day one. That's yesterday, where Russian President Vladimir Putin welcomed Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the dinner hosted for BRICS leaders in Kazan in Russia. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, along with other BRICS leaders, witnessed a musical performance as well. Prime Minister Modi on Tuesday also witnessed an exhibition on Mahatma Gandhi, which was put up on the occasion of his visit to Kazan. The exhibition, among other things, highlighted the Mahatma's engagement with Leo Tolstoy. The exhibition bears special significance as Leo Tolstoy lived and studied in Kazan for several years. And I think as we stay with these visuals, this is very symbolic that the effort put forth by Russia. Well, it's a BRICS summit. You're looking at more than 12 dozen world leaders, but a special sort of setup for India and the hospitality part of it. So
that is also while you
it's
are
symbolic.
while you are having Mahatma Gandhi's in the exhibitions, that gives gives a message. Is a message of non-violence, that ahimsa paramo dharma, and India believes in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So these are the messages that India wants to give to the world community. Very interesting point. What while I was
listening to reporters, right?
I was listening all these points. You know what BRICS is? BRICS is basically it doesn't conflict with the Washington consensus. But BRICS wants to set its own agenda, its own rules, regulations for the world, its own currency, and they want to transactions and terms and everything with these countries, and wants to in fact de-dollarize themselves, culturally de-Americanized, de-McDonaldized, and economically de-dollarizations are the agenda. But very interesting point, you will see the BRICS, what it is not a regional organization. It is a organizations from the different regions, from Africa, from Asia, from Europe, that they are coming. But very interesting, and it is different from G7. G7 is a West organization. G20 is basically the platform for the North and the South. They are coming together, all that. But BRICS is basically that you can say that non-Western institution organizations, and they are coming together and they are building confidence among them. And there, you know, very interesting point, this summit is happening in Russia. Russia is in conflict in Ukraine, and the West is mobilizing, NATO is mobilizing against Russian action in Ukraine. And there, while Modi and Xi Jinping is coming together, I think there is something positive will come in a sense of peace and stability of the Asian region, that they are looking forward. And I think this is the region that Modi and Xi Jinping, they are meeting, they are having bilateral discussions, and particularly the irritants, the border issues that would be resolved. So you can see that there is hope that the BRICS can really represent the non-Western voice under this platform. But I'm sure that India is not looking forward to have anti-West voice in this platform. That could be a constructive, positive platform to address the issues of development, sustainable development, and human developmental issues that the global south is facing. And I think this can become...
So getting that element of balance, that's why BRICS needs India at this juncture as much as Putin needs.
Yes, that is the core point.
Yeah. Can I take this point to Ambassador Lagun? As a diplomat, how do you see that, sir? India bringing the much needed balance onto the fore of BRICS, considering the timings amidst the Russia-Ukraine onslaught.
India has played out its mind and has not only spoken in words, also in action. For example, in the conflict going on in Israel, Hamas, and Lebanon, in the UN resolution where it was moved by the Arab world that the Israel vacate the Palestinian territories, and India and another which are now members of BRICS, Ethiopia, are the only one who abstained, in that voting. So giving a very clear message that India would stand by its own principles and is not necessarily anti-Western. But and will play a balancing role, so that I am sure after that voting, the West also has more confidence in India when they are attending this BRICS summit. And as the reporter said, that the journalists from the Western side are much more present in Kazan than the
BRICS journalists,
from,
yes.
from the BRICS. So they are watching very closely, and already because of these recent past actions, India is already seen, and I was reading some of the press reviews in US journalism.
Yes, sir.
With regard to comments. So they see India as one which is not threatened,
Okay.
whereas
Yes,
the
sir.
role of China and Russia are views with more circumspect and more antagonism.
All right. We'll have to wrap it here, but I take this opportunity to thank my power-packed panel, Professor Bharadwaj. Thank you so much, and such a pleasure as always, sir, talking to you, Ambassador Lagoon, for joining us on this special broadcast. Thank you. Well, with that, it's time to wrap up India at BRICS, our special broadcast on DD India. Meanwhile, news and updates continue on your channel, DD India, India's voice to the world. Stay with us.